I look like who?
Bill Haley in the comments.
I got the faux pompidor happening.
Yeah, you got the whole deal, man. You know, you look good. How's things going? How's
Everything
Chicago?
Everything is you know, in spite of everything else, I'm enjoying myself. Especially, I was so excited to talk to you. But I always get nervous as to what I'm going to talk about, and then I thought a second ago when I noticed Joe Strummer right over your right shoulder, that's how I found out who you were in the first place. I'd seen Julien Temple's documentary, The Future Is Unwritten. I thought, who's this Vietnam veteran who knew Joe Strummer? And I contacted you, and now I'm just blessed to say that I've been your friend for over 10 years.
Yeah, 10 years. You know, it was so funny because are we recording this now?
Yeah, sure.
It's so funny when they premiered that movie, that Future's Unwritten. It was at the New Art. Remember, right around the corner where I met you guys. We went down to have the bubble tea, and so the movie let out as I was going back to the hotel, right, from the West VA. You know, and everybody said, "My God, it's the guy from the movie!" And all these people gathered around me and stuff on Santa Monica Boulevard, and I talked to them about the movie. Yeah. So I just going by, the thing let out, and people screamed, "It's the guy from the movie!" And there I was.
Was that the first time? Was that the first time you ever saw it?
No. I saw it in New York when Julien premiered it.
How did you feel after that came out? I mean, what were your emotions like when you watched the film?
Well, it was a lot, you know, because at one time I was very close with those guys. You know, I mean, I had a lot of confidence in them, and they seemed to have a lot of confidence in me, and that was good. You know, we had confidence in each other, right?
Yeah. How did they know you in the first place?
They were fans of mine from being when they were younger, right? They were Daddy Longlegs fans. So they used to go see Daddy Longlegs when we played in Britain. And then they found out, how was that? They were mixing Give Them Enough Rope in Spanish. I mean, in San Francisco. And I was working at the radio station. So I found out where they were, and I contacted them, and they couldn't believe it was the guy from Daddy Longlegs, the singer and everything. And so then they hung out with me in San Francisco for a little bit that time while they were mixing Give Them Enough Rope. And I don't know, from there I went over to England with them, and, you know, they took me around with them. I stayed at Johnny Green's house.
Didn't you have something to do with the Sandinista idea?
Yeah, that's because I was working with the Sandinistas. I started working with the Sandinistas very early on. I think 76 is when I started working with the Frente. There was a guy named Roberto Vargas. And yeah, I started working with Sandinistas way before I got into the Cuban thing. Really, Cuban thing didn't come in along until 79. But the Sandinistas, I was collecting, and also I was helping people that escaped Chile. So I worked with an organization called the Office for Human Rights and Individual Protections or something in Chile, and I was helping people get out of Chile when Pinochet was there.
Who is the famous Chilean folk singer who or was that Venezuela?
No, that was Victor Jara. Had his hands cut off. Yeah, Well, that's why we don't really like coup d'etats very much, because they tend to take us in bad places.
Absolutely. What you know, we're going to be all over the place. I'm going to ask you some questions, but what engendered those particular issues to you to get involved in whatever struggle or humanitarian efforts in Latin America?
Well, I had gone to Colombia. See, I'd really gotten too I was having nervous breakdowns under Nixon. I did not have that the same level of nervous breakdowns under Trump, but under Nixon, I was really bad off. And so I decided, well, look, I'm just going to leave the country because, you know, I'm an explosives guy. I'm mentally ill. I'm totally out of my tree. You know, I mean, I can get that way. Again, there was, in those days, it was just like, I was just like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, right? So like, I'd be okay. Well, it's kind of like the way with this post-cancer treatment now. I never know from 1 hour to the next I'm going to feel with this post-cancer treatment. Same way with the psych stuff in those days. I never knew from 1 hour to the next, like where I'd be at, and if I'd have a breakdown, and if I had a breakdown, what would that mean? And you know, and so I had all this aggressiveness still. I still have some of that left over from the war. It's really hard deprogramming that. And so yeah, there I was. You know, I was there 79. I was working with the Sandinistas, trying to get money. The Sandinistas trying to get people out of Chile, and then I got accepted into the first delegation of radio broadcasters to Cuba, and so I went there with there was a delegation of about 30 of us, and I went to Cuba, and I got along very well with everybody, and I just kept my relationships with them. I never really, except for Roberto Vargas, he's still my friend on Facebook, but I never see too much. You know, I don't even know kind of what happened to Nicaragua or anything. I mean, they kind of just, they're Sandinista, but they aren't the same Sandinistas that I, you know, but I'm not the same Moe I once was either, but it's the same guy. They're changing.
What always strikes me about your story is just, if looking very much on the surface, it was the same way I felt when I met you or had seen you in the film. I thought, wow, this man has lived a very eventful life up into, you know, maybe just 30 years old. And you sort of you had the 60s on every level. You'd been to Vietnam. You came back right, you know, at the precipice.
Before the term hippie, I was in San Francisco before the term hippie.
Right.
Hippie. LSD was legal. Imagine that. LSD was legal. You could buy LSD just like you could buy soda pop.
When did you return home? I know that you were
about May of '66. I tried to come back to Illinois. Remember, I'm originally from around Galesburg. So I tried to come home, but that was just too far gone for mom and dad.
Well, what I'm interested in is many different things. What I wanted to ask you, because since we're already on the dawning of the age of Aquarius, as they say in the song, were you open about having been in combat to your people in the counterculture, let's say?
Yeah, everybody I could talk to, I talked about it. I figured that's my only salvation, right? But I just was honest, you know, rather than store this stuff in me, you know.
Right.
Dad had been in the Second World War, right? And he'd been in the Battle of the Bulge, and he never talked about it. But me, I just talked about it because I was trying to figure out, like, what had happened to me. I'd gone from where I was like this decorated combat veteran lifer, and now I'm just another kind of disheveled mental patient on the streets of America, you know. So I'm going, wow, you know, how'd all this happen? So I was always processing with everybody. And I wasn't waiting to go in and see some kind of appointment at social workers or anything. You were on a bus stop, I'd just tell you, man, I just got back from the war. Right. I mean, I'm really blown out of my tree. I leveled with people, right? And I met really good people because of that. And also that whole story about, you know, protesters spitting on veterans, and that nothing like that ever happened. As a matter of fact, all these counterculture people that you described, they were very nice to me. I didn't even know that vegetables, you know, I thought everything came in a can. You know, if you want spinach, you bought a can of it, right? You know, I thought every corn, you know, I thought everything was in a can, you know. Right. So people taught me about fresh vegetables and how to live right and how to get healthy. I mean, everything had been a can. I mean, when I got out of Vietnam, I think I bought hundreds of dollars worth of cans, just stored them in the apartment, right? Everything for me was canned food. So people took me in, you know, and they really taught me a whole new way of living, which I still hold to today, really. I mean, I think, you know, I always tell people I'm a conservative, you know, because I don't believe in spending more money than I make, right? But I'm not one of these ideologues, you know. I mean, I think we need, like, people who are liberals. We need people who are in the counterculture. We need people who are in think tanks and doing things and inventing things. We need everybody, you know what I mean? So I came out of there, you know, I'd been kind of a extreme right-wing guy before I went in, like Minuteman, John Bircher type of guy, right? So, I mean, the war kind of blew me out of the water on that. They got all that out of my system. I could see that was going to go nowhere.
Was there a John Birch Society in your neighborhood growing up?
I was the guy that organized it. Yes.
But yet, but you still read books by Terry Southern. It doesn't make sense.
Well, yeah, the Magic Christian. Yeah, I love that. But I always thought that was so fascinating. You know, then they made that movie out. The movie didn't hold up as well as the book did it. Yeah, that was. I read that book going over to Vietnam.
Yeah, but you were. It's from what I know about your story, and you could certainly add on, is that you weren't the typical recruit. First of all, you were in the Navy, correct?
I was a corpsman. I came in to be under underwater demolition, which is SEAL team now, right? Mm-hmm. But they told me I couldn't do that because I had to stay in the Navy for a couple of years and work as a bosun's mate, you know, chip paint on ships and things like that, and then try to get into UDT. But if I became a medical corpsman, the Marine Corps had an outfit just like UDT called Recon, and I might be able to get into that. So I immediately took that because everybody kept telling me, well, you know, when I come out of this, you know, if the better I am in the service, the more likely I am to play football. That was I always thought I'd just get a football scholarship, right? Like, you know, like at I don't know, all those, like, you know, mom and dad grew up around Western Illinois, and you know, there's Northern Illinois up there. I mean, I thought I'd go back to some kind of colleges, the Ozarks. I like that down in Arkansas. You know, so I always thought that's the way my life would be. I just kind of like, but I always read, Steve. Even as a young kid, I read. I didn't do well in school, but I always read. Like, I wrote the school musical every year and put myself in the lead part conveniently. But, you know, but you know, I just wasn't a good student till later. You know, later I became valedictorian in my class, and you know, all that, you know, 250 credits and something like 7 years and the whole deal. But you know, in those days I wasn't a good student, but I loved the Boy Scouts, I loved camping out, I loved doing the school musicals, I loved playing football. So I liked everything that was kind of extracurricular.
But you must have pushed yourself really to the limit athletically if you wanted to have a football future. And then when you go into the service and you volunteer for recon duty.
Yes, I was in very great, I've got photos of me. I was in very good physical shape, but you know, recon guys are thin, not like muscular, you know, so they want recon guys that can swim and walk endless patrols, which is all I did really. And I was in first recon for 2 years before I went to Vietnam. That was at Oceanside, Camp Pendleton. So I mean, all we did was just do patrols then too, you know.
So does your DD-14 say Marine Corps? Or
no, it says Navy, but assigned to the Marines. I have my duty stations with the Marines. So I have my separate little duty stations.
Right, because you know, you don't strike me as a sailor, you know.
No, well, see, the only reason I went in is because I was such a good swimmer, you know. In our family, like, I had to swim the Mississippi River across before I was 14. So in our family, we're all like swimmers, right? So I got into it because I wanted to be a frogman swimmer, right? But I became the frogman swimmer by going in the Marine Corps. So I was happy. You know, went to diving school in the Philippines. It was beautiful. Went to mountain climbing school. I loved that. I really loved the Marine Corps in peacetime. It's just the darn wartime where everybody's kind of shouting and screaming, and you know, people are my friends are collapsing from wounds. Some words.
I couldn't imagine.
Stuff. What?
How quickly until you were assigned to Marine reconnaissance, and then are you living at Pendleton for the next 2 years?
Yeah, 2 years at Pendleton, and I go to Vietnam for a year.
Now, tell me about those. I always love to hear about Moe pre-Vietnam, because you're still so interested in the world. You're going up and down to LA, and
well, it didn't start that way. Okay. You know, I was very happy with recon, but you know, when we go out to these places, right, these bars, these guys would get drunk and they'd have a fight. You know, like Sergeant Bass. The last one I went to, Sergeant Bass was drunk and said, "I haven't had anybody to have sex with, and I think I might as well fuck a Ranger tonight," you know. So then, you know, and then a big fight with the Army Rangers, and Sergeant Bass bit the guy's ear off, you know, the bottom part of the ear, and carried around the bar with his, the bloody ear in his mouth and stuff. And I said, you guys are like, I couldn't trust a better group of folks than you guys. I mean, if I was in combat, why, you guys, I know that we're going to get through it all together. But, at the same time, this is my idea of fun. I'm going to go up to Disneyland, right? And I started going to Disneyland, and then I went to LA after that. And in LA, I mean, it was just like I was in heaven. I mean, it was like Disneyland, but it was free. And, Hollywood had the Pickwick bookstore, and I'd always liked to read. So this guy started introducing me to Thomas Wolfe, not the Tom Wolfe, but Thomas Wolfe of, You Can't Look Homeward, Angel, You Can't Go Back Again, The Web and the Rock. So I started reading those books, and I got taken away. And then poetry came into my life. I started reading about the beatniks, actually, because there were all these beatniks at Venice, down in Venice Beach, right? And there were coffee houses. So then I started going to coffee houses and reading this is all before the war, reading my poems, and people say, man, you are a strange dude for being in the Marine Corps. you're a really strange dude for being in the Marine Corps. But, I went back to, it was on 8 Dudley. I don't know if you know that part about Venice or not. 8 Dudley, down by the beach.
Right.
So, that's where I go read the poems and listen to the music.
What about the Ash Grove? Did you ever go there?
I loved Ash Grove. I was there all the time. And Dad loved it too, because, see, Dad grew up with the Stoneman family, see? So the Stoneman family had all gone to L.A., right?
They were from Illinois.
WJJD, the only station played country music in the United States, man, was not WSM. It was WJJD in Chicago.
The Sundowners would play.
WJJD in Chicago was the only country station in the whole United States, man. I mean,
that's why I was glad that they talked about that on the country music documentary on PBS. I had no idea.
No, WJJD?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, WJJD, see, the Carters, they played there. They had, I think a half an hour. They were on acetate record then, but I mean, big country deal there in Illinois. People didn't realize that, because of Chicago.
Were you still able to compartmentalize those interests? You've got the more bohemian side developing, and then you're going back to recon, and when do you get your orders? Because Vietnam's not really happening yet, is it?
No, Vietnam's not happening. We kept thinking we were going into Cuba. We kept thinking Cuba was the country we were going to invade. See, we were all prepped for Cuba. Each of our squads had a Spanish-speaking person in it, so we were all prepped for Cuba. So I went over to the Philippines thinking, man, I was on Easy Street going to enjoy my life. The best time I ever had was in the Philippines, really. And military, swimming and diving, and wow, just eating fresh fish all the time. It was in heaven. And then all of a sudden, next thing you know, the war came, but it was always supposed to be a police action, right? They were just going to go and kick some ass and get out. That's what they said. They were just going to go and kick some ass and get out. Then I landed at Da Nang, Chulai. I didn't come in. Actually, Recon was the first firefight in Vietnam, April 22nd, 1965. That would have been, I think, Delta Company. I was in Alpha Company.
Of what outfit?
Recon. 3rd Recon was the first firefight in Vietnam. The 3rd Recon has that distinction, being the first firefight in Vietnam. First engagement with the Viet Cong, April 22nd, 1965.
And they tried to overrun Da Nang, didn't they?
They overran Da Nang.
They overran Da Nang.
Yeah, Da Nang was gone. If the Marines had to come in, Da Nang wouldn't have lasted 24 hours.
Wow.
They were everywhere. Yeah, they were everywhere. They were just across the street.
That's a nice welcome to Vietnam, Moe.
Well, yeah, and the same with Chulai too. Chulai was just barren. It was just beaches. They had to build a whole airstrip for jet fighters on that sand and everything. And they spend some money in these wars. I'm telling you. I'm just trying to get a little garden out back, and these big movers and shakers are building airstrips on sand dunes and what have you. I'm just going, well, so I just saw a lot of lives and money wasted myself. That's why I saw, I couldn't figure out why would we go in to blow these guys up when we're gonna have to build them back anyway. So why don't we just build them back and save the time and the money, right?
How do you get there? How do you arrive by boat? Tell me, bring me up to, you know,
well, I was in scuba school, right?
Yeah.
And I was supposed to go back to Okinawa, so they sent me back to Okinawa, and then I got all my stuff and got on a boat, and they shipped me because nobody knew what was going to happen to us, right? Nobody knew, man. We just had our little foot lockers, right? And then they shipped us over to Chulai. Then after Chulai, then they moved us up to, but fortunately, being in recon, we weren't a large group of people, so they didn't lose things, right? They didn't lose things like my uniforms. But I didn't have they issued me a 45 pistol, and there's no way I'm going into combat with 45 pistols. So I got myself one of those grease guns, you know.
I was always wondering, you know, when I look at the pictures that you post, they don't look like your stock photos of the Vietnam War. You guys almost look like advisors with no tin hat on, no helmet.
No, we had no protective gear at all. We just went on we went on like we went on 100-mile patrols, man.
So you arrived with your team. So you came with an intact unit.
No. I arrived as a corpsman. I hadn't been assigned to a team because I got sent to Okinawa.
Gotcha.
Then Okinawa, I got what's called pre-scuba school. So I passed that. Then they had sent me over to scuba school in the Philippines, right? And while I was in the Philippines, that's when Vietnam broke. But we just didn't, you know. So I got assigned a whole different unit. I got assigned A company.
Who are some of the personalities when you first get there?
Well, there was Lieutenant McCaskill and Frank Reesner. Frank got the Congressional Medal of Honor. Frank was a very decent guy. He'd been an enlisted guy and then been promoted. I think he was a captain by the time he got shot. He got killed. Frank did. And Jim Shockley, he and I, and then there was a guy from Maine that I really liked. Kaler, Dan Kaler. He ended up running Kaler's. He had a whole fishing fleet after the war and stuff, and did lobster and stuff. Has his own restaurant up there in Maine, Kaler's.
Did you feel as though your training had prepared you?
Oh yeah. And I had also been an instructor 2 years before the war, so I instructed other people. I have that mask, remember?
Yes.
The Marine Corps gave me a special mask before the war of my training, you know. So strangely enough, when I lived in Colombia, the guy was head of the Marine Corps barracks at the embassy, the United States Embassy in Colombia. Mm-hmm. He had been a student of mine, and he couldn't believe I had the long hair and the beard and the whole deal then. But right. You know, so did Merle Haggard. Anyway, he thanked me. Said I saved his life, you know, because I taught him like how to, you know, survive out there. You know, we were very well prepared when we went to Vietnam. You know, they kept wanting to depend on this mass bombing, you know, but we knew that you had to go out to the villages, get the villages on our side, and that's what we did, right? We went out and we got, you know, I went out and did first aid. It was pretty simple because many people just had like infections, you know, from being in the fields. They use human waste for what do you call it? The fertilizer. And so everybody had infections all the time. And of course, everybody just peed and pooped by the side of the roads, right? There was people just, everywhere you went, that's all people did. They just pulled down their pants and just peed and pooped right in the path. I mean, I'm talking in the cities, you know. Right. So, I mean, they were just plagued with all kinds of infections, really.
What was the AO? Like, where was your area of operations?
It was called Camp Reesner.
Okay.
Camp Reesner. I can send you. I have a nice Marine Corps article about that.
But where in the country, so people could?
Oh, right outside of Da Nang.
Okay. So you immediately start doing long range patrols.
Yeah, that's all we knew. I mean, I've been doing that since peacetime, you know.
Right.
Every week going out in a helicopter somewhere and somebody dropping me and having to walk back.
How many men?
About 12 or less. Sometimes only 6 or so.
For
a lot of us.
Wow. So it's really, I mean, if you get ambushed, you're fucked.
I almost got fucked a couple of times. Yeah,
Wow.
but you know, we stumbled on a large enclave where they had hospitals and mess halls. We were outnumbered by like 10-1. Just that we screamed a lot, and you know, had hand grenades, and they made big booms, and everybody ran for the woods. Thinking we were more than we were.
As a medic, I mean, were you required to fight as well?
Oh yeah, there's no. I mean, I was there to carry out the war operation. That's my job. You know?
What? Tell us about, you know, I sort of marveled when you were telling, or I read something that you had to send requests home for your mother to send you some kind of automatic weapon cleaner.
Because the grease gun is very delicate, right? And so I had to take the springs out, stretch the springs like every day. I had to clean the magazines. I had to clean the grease gun. I had to clean it every day just to make it operational. You know, I couldn't be a day, because what happened is that the springs would get soft and they wouldn't put rounds into the chamber. So, you know, and if I need that grease, and it's a couple of times I needed that grease gun. And so I need that grease gun working, you know what I mean? So I had to clean it. But it took a lot more maintenance than your AR-15. We only had the M14s then. The AR-15 just came out. The AR-16 wasn't quite out. We were there very, very early.
Yeah. So the morale must have been a lot better, right?
Yeah, it was better because everybody thought they were going to go home.
Right.
You know, I mean, later on, it just seemed like it drug on forever and ever, you know, but we were only supposed to be there 6 months and get out, you know, and then all of a sudden we're there over a year.
So
but the morale always was good. The morale in recon was always good. I mean, recon is work hard, play hard kind of stuff, you know, so. I mean, even in peacetime, like we were always cold and miserable, and we always had nothing. It was just total sacrifice all the time. But we always felt good. We always joked with each other. We always encouraged each other.
Yeah, the pictures that I've seen of you and your comrades, everyone's smiling. Obviously, you're not in the field, but you had a guitar there.
Right.
You sang songs. What do you start to feel, let's say 6 months into it? Because I know that you have a very unique case. You never got out of the field.
Not really.
Did you notice things starting to slip mentally then?
No, but they started to slip mentally when me, it was like an instantaneous onset, really. Last patrol, I didn't really have much to do. I mean, I could have just like finished that patrol and walked out of Vietnam, and we killed 2 North Vietnamese guys, and I was trying to save the 3rd guy's life, and the captain didn't care. He didn't give as far as he is concerned, the guy's the enemy. He didn't care if he lived or died. But I had been there. I was kind of idealistic. I was one of these guys, you know, with the American way of life. We have to spread the American way of life for the rest of the world. I was one of those kind of guys.
You're an idealist.
Yeah, well, so, you know, I mean, I can see now that not everybody's going to be able to have and maintain a target in their country. And I mean, there's going to be some severe, you know, limitations with the American way of life that I was promoting. But in those days, it seemed like a good thing. You know, like everybody have this form of prosperity. We'll all love each other, and we'll all listen to the Beatles together. So you know, there was that. And I did the Beatles had hit, so I was already familiar with the Beatles. And I had seen Bob Dylan before I went to Vietnam. That was an eye-opener.
Where did you see him?
Long Beach, California. Long Beach, California. I saw him in, 64, I think, something like that. With the Golden Bear, when the Golden Bear presented him. Just him by himself, man. I had tickets right there in front of the stage, right there.
Just a guitar.
Just him and a guitar, man. It was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen. And I was only like 5 feet from the guy, you know, when he's singing. So it's amazing, you know.
That is amazing.
Well, I got in there, you know, it's Long Beach. And I already said, well, this guy's profound, man. I already knew this guy was going to be like big, you know. I mean, he's incredible just by himself. So, you know, I'd be exposed to different music, and they sent me the free press. And people from the War Resisters League got in touch with me, you know. So I knew that people weren't going for the war. I knew people weren't going for the war in general, but it seemed like there were more and more people that weren't going for this war, the Vietnam War, right? And, you know, I mean, we had studied, Lieutenant Crane had had a study about the French experience. What's that? The Godard movie, A Man and a Woman, about the Vietnam veteran that goes to Vietnam and then he comes back to France.
Right.
And he's just like an American veteran, right? He's drunk, he can't keep his marriage together, he can't keep a job together, can't keep anything together. He's just kind of disgruntled and alienated. So we had known that had happened to the French, and so we were trying to prepare to not have that happen to us. But in the end, nobody followed our advice. You know, in the end, they went out, they tried to do the mass bombing.
What was your advice? What was your advice?
Our advice was just gotta like go out there and go out in the villages and live with people, and you know, step by step you build them back, and you know, that's what you do. You just kind of, it takes you forever, you know, you just kind of stabilize. But they wanted these big operations, right, where they would have all these body bags and they could show the American people how many people they were killing. The Vietnamese really didn't care how many people they killed, really. As far as they were concerned, there were just more of them than us, you know, right off the top, you know. So I mean, and they knew it, right? So that wasn't gonna, I mean, even that military strategy was a bad strategy.
What was the policy with medics though? Was it 6 months in and then out?
Supposed to be. I ended up being there the whole year. I didn't know that. Is that way with the Marines too? I didn't know the Marines rotated themselves out. I didn't even get R&R. So, you know, because I always had to go back on more patrols, right? I was always on patrols.
How did you feel before that? You know, how long, you know, when you were told we're going out again? I mean, was this something that you
went out, man? I really go to the bathroom. I just, you know, I was so used to going out, it didn't bother me. The only time I've ever really bothered me was on that one patrol where I kind of lost my idealism.
What happened?
Well, I told you that guy that, I'll be right back. With that, I was on that patrol where the captain didn't really care if the guy lived or died, right? So,
right.
You know, so, and I didn't believe that. I mean, I thought I was there to save everybody's life, you know, like if the guy's Vietnamese, I'm trying to save his life. The guy's American, you know, we're there to make the country better, not just run up the kill ratios. But
and you're there a year already when this happened.
I've been there a year, yeah. I mean, that's the weird thing about this psych stuff, you know, because it was just like somebody just cracked me in the head. Now, you know, we know about post-traumatic stress disorder, and it was an instantaneous onset. People are more, and I was a medical corpsman. I'd never been trained in psych stuff, right? Next thing you know, I'm flipped out. So I didn't know what to do with me, I can tell you. And nobody else did either, and still doesn't seem to, for whatever it's worth. But
well, how did you react to seeing dead people, you know, that were killed in battle?
That was just like photos or something,
right?
So, you know, so there were piles of them, right? So they were stacked like cordwood, right? So it'd just be photos, you know, going by these stacks of bodies because they were counting the bodies all the time. So, you know, that really bothered me. To be honest with you, it was just, I think that, you know, they just couldn't keep putting me out there on those patrols all the time and not have me take a break. I mean, I think that, you know, and I was tired. And then when this guy tells me he doesn't care if the guy lives or dies, you know, because he's Vietnamese. I mean, that just kind of broke my heart. You know, we come to that.
Had the lieutenant been with you for most of the year?
No, he was a new guy. You know, we get these new guys, you know, they kind of think they're going to win the war because we didn't or something. There's a whole bunch of that or something.
So everyone called you Doc?
Yeah, Doc Armstrong.
So let's talk about the because I want to do this somewhat episodically, but you have a breakdown. Tell me, bring me to San Francisco.
Well, I got medevaced out on a helicopter faster than guys that were wounded. You know, I mean, they had a tag on me. Of course, you know, everybody in the airplanes are nervous because they got this tag that says, you know, I'm a mental patient. So, you know, and we get back to San Francisco, and I'd just been through San Francisco a year before, right? and I'd seen some folk clubs, and there was like a little bookstore, and I liked all that. So, you know, I knew these friends of mine came up from LA, and they put me in the trunk of the car, and they drove me to San Francisco. And I went to City Lights Books. I got a whole bunch of books of poems and things like that. Figure I just sit there and read poems, I'd be calm and I'd be okay. I still think that today.
But you had to sleep at, I mean, when you first get to the, which hospital did you go to?
I went to the Navy Hospital.
Okay.
It was in Oakland, California, Oak Knoll.
And how long did it take for you to be somewhat, you know, resilient enough to leave and go out and go down to City Lights bookstore and, you know,
Well, they snuck me out. They weren't letting me do that yet. You know,
okay.
So Steve and Leah, I knew them from LA, and they came up to San Francisco to see me. And so they snuck me out. But yeah, they didn't, you know, I was under really tight supervision the whole time I was there.
What do you remember about those before Steve and Leah came? Like, you know, when you were
kind of stark, you know, I mean, everything was kind of stark. I was just in this war. I didn't have anything. All I had was my pajamas and slippers. And, you know, I mean, it's just kind of like I had nothing in life, right? I mean, just my life was completely stripped of anything and everything I had. I mean, basically, you know, we just assume we have all these things around us, you know, which are kind of our form of our identity.
Right.
But all that stuff was gone.
So so you get back in '66. This is first of all, I think I met Leah in LA.
Yeah. You met Leah, yeah.
Is she still around?
I don't know. I think she got very sick.
Very nice lady.
Very sick. Yeah, she's great lady. And I had wanted to convert to Judaism before the war. So Steve and Leah were Jewish, and they lined me up with a rabbi, and I had to spend a year with this rabbi studying all this Jewish stuff, you know, to see if I was really honestly sincere about conversion.
Well, it's in your lineage, isn't it? Isn't
supposed to be? Yes.
Yeah.
It seems like the Kramer part of my family are the Kramers from Ohio that were converted from Judaism. Seems like they're the same Kramers. They're from this county in Ohio where all these other Kramers were converted. They had a big celebration. They love converting people.
Well, you're just Jewish, you know. You're Jewish. So tell me about. I loved because I've read.
I might be.
Tell me about, what did you first meet Neil Cassidy? Because that story that always makes me laugh.
I met Neil. I met Neil through Stella. Stella Levy was this person who found me right after the war, right? Mm-hmm. And she lived at Oak and Fillmore, and I lived at Oak and Fillmore. And then Neil moved in above them. He had got an attic with Ann Murphy, and then they had a huge fight. Ann kicked him out. He had nowhere to live. And next thing you know, Neil was knocking at my door, wondering if he could crash at my place. So I just said, yeah, he could crash at my place. And we lived like that for several weeks till the January 1st. So pretty much the whole month of December, Neil was like crashing at my place, but he'd stay awake all night and just talk to himself. And then I'd have to kind of hustle him up automobiles, you know, because he's always wanting to drive cars, but he didn't have a car. So I had to talk other people into letting Neil drive the car, even though he was a very erratic driver. It seemed to other people, his driving manners startled people. And so that was a little hard, you know, finding him automobiles all the time, but I did it. You know, and he was a great guy. He was very good to me, you know, because he'd been around for a while. So I was at the point now where I didn't know anything about drugs, right? I mean, I could just take in all the heroin I wanted and just die from an overdose rather rapidly. So Neil taught me all about drugs and what to do, what not to do, and not to shoot up, never under any circumstances put the stuff in my veins, et cetera, et cetera. And so, you know, I ended up being very, very grateful to Neil. And also Neil was a guy that knew everything about music and everything about jazz. He listened to the radio all the time. See, 24/7 he was listening. And San Francisco had very sophisticated radio programming as far as jazz goes and everything, very sophisticated, and classical even. So Neil was up on all that stuff because he just like drove around and listened to the radio, and he knew all about these different artists and when they recorded and the albums they made, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
How long until you took acid? for the first time? What do you remember?
No, I remember that very well. That happened right after the war. That happened somewhere. That happened like in that happened right after I got out of psych hospital. So John Cannell, he was married to Stella Levy. He went with me on my first trip, and it was impressive. I realized I could be, the same stuff. I could be at one with the world.
Sure.
I didn't have to fight the world. I could be part of the world. For me, it was things I had already discovered kind of from having this nervous breakdown, but the nervous breakdown left my head kind of disjointed, so I couldn't put the pieces together. Acid kind of like gave me the big picture, and I realized that I could live in the world being me. I didn't have to like conform to them. I could just be myself.
Thank God that you were sort of malleable enough to kind of bend in that situation, as opposed to it being sort of a bad trip the first time.
Yeah, well, I mean, having gone through speaking of bad trips, having gone through Vietnam and the entire Recon experience for like 3 years, that was like the ultimate bad trip in a way. So
God, it can only get better.
This was like, at least it's had colors and vibrancy, and I could eat. And, I mean, it was convenient. I mean, everything in Recon was just total deprivation. Like you weren't allowed to pee, you weren't allowed to shit, you weren't allowed to drink. You had to eat. When you walked, you couldn't sit down and eat. Everything. So all of a sudden, with acid, I found out that the world was a lot more gracious. I could sit down, see a tree, see the flowers. I didn't have to be like on the go all the time.
What were some of the first bands that you saw? Didn't you go? Which ballroom did you go to?
First one I saw was that darn Airplane, man. When Bill Graham was still doing a benefit for the mime troupe. And that's why I had liberty from the psychiatric hospital. So I had liberty from the psychiatric hospital. I went over to San Francisco, and I saw that concert. Man, I couldn't believe it. That was at the old Fillmore.
No kidding.
Yeah, that was at the old Fillmore. That was, I think, the first time he was still doing. It was a benefit for the mime troupe.
So how were you getting some kind of what would you call it, like dispensation or something from the military to live? Were you getting paid at all?
Not yet. I got a severance pay.
Okay.
And that kept me for about 6 months. I worked for the post office, then I worked for the Forest Service. I just kept having nervous breakdowns, right? So no matter what I did, I kind of had a nervous breakdown. And that's when I ended up going to New Mexico, right? Because they just said I can't live in these urban areas anymore. I'm just like too frazzed out in my head. And I was right. Fortunately for me, that was a very smart move on my part.
Oh, yeah.
Because if I would have stayed in the cities, I would have ended up being chewed up. I mean, I just see people do that. At least I went off to a place that was green and water flowed, and trees, and I could walk in the woods. I could have a gentle life around me.
So those were good years then when you moved to San Francisco or Santa Fe, right?
Santa Fe and we go back and forth. It was only 12 hours to LA. So, in San Francisco was what, another 6 to 8 or something. I've forgotten what. But
is that when you got involved with Daddy Longlegs?
Daddy Longlegs came off the streets of San Francisco. Okay. I used to sing and pass the hat in Golden Gate Park up there. Me and that guy Steve that plays guitar. He's the greatest guitar player I found ever in my life, really.
Wow.
I mean, he was great. There's nobody ever came close to him. He could just go for hours, play that guitar for 12 hours, man. Just sit there and play guitar.
Had you not gone to Vietnam, you might have. I mean, you were already on a fast track of the arts. You wrote a book. You wrote the play in high school. You win the twist. Yeah. Didn't you win the twist competition?
Yes, I did. With WLS and Dick Biondi.
I love it.
I did do that. Yeah, I did that. WLS and Dick Biondi. Yeah, I just didn't know those things. That's why now, later on, like I'm going to go back and probably get an MFA in puppetry, at the University of Connecticut, right? Because I enjoy those things, right? And so they have a good MFA in puppetry. But I probably would have done very well at the very beginning with MFAs. I tried to do that with the VA. The VA wanted me to do just regular business degrees, but I didn't think I'd ever use business degrees. But now I've got that center where I was working. Now that center's only 3 blocks from my house, so I could go over there as a volunteer, do the puppet shows, do everything, because I don't know if I want to. I don't want to go back and do it. I can't. I don't think. I don't think I have the physical strength to.
Well, you're doing it. I love watch everything you post on Facebook is such a treat. You know, it's almost. I mean, it's really it's almost a gift. Anyone who's lucky enough to be your Facebook friend gets treated to just this. I don't know. It almost. I wouldn't compare you to Will Rogers because you're Moe Armstrong. You know, but what I want to ask you is take me to the point, because I think what's most important, in addition to, you know, your magnificent otherness, which, you know, everyone who knows you gets a taste of, but you've been really, you've done some amazing work with veterans and have been awarded as such. Tell me how Vet to Vet started.
Well, Vet to Vet started because I was doing that kind of work in Massachusetts for the state. So anybody who had mental illness or psychiatric condition in Massachusetts, I was setting up peer support meetings with the state, right? And the VA called me and they wanted to research it, right? They wanted to investigate and have a research project. So I said, okay, I'll do it, because everybody's saying you need research to do anything, to be accepted with anything, right? So that's how I got involved with the VA. It was like part of a research project that I was involved with. And with Bob Rosenheck and Sandy Resnick, and it was good. You know, those are good people, and I'm glad I did that.
Well, now what's the concept behind it? It's explain what Vet to Vet.
Well, Vet to Vet is based on an educational idea that people, like, I might have emotional. Now they talk about this stuff, emotional intelligence, right? But in my day, they didn't talk about any of that.
Right.
But I knew that I had emotional shortcomings. I had an emotional short fuse. But it seems as though if I was able to read, or if I was able to read and talk, I could do a lot to keep myself stable. So when the bad moments came along, I wouldn't fall apart. So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to set this whole thing up like more like a literacy campaign in a way. More, you know, but take these books out, like the Recovery Workbook from Boston University, or take out Mental Illness Anonymous. Like most people, they kind of, they know they're overextended on dope and also their own insanity or their own psych stuff, right? But they don't know how to, like, reduce the cycle or even get out of the cycle if they want. But I'm more into harm reduction, right? So I'm into more reducing. I mean, people are taking things for some reason, you know, like they just aren't, like, we talk about recreational, but a lot of people I meet, especially now I've had a chance to interview hundreds of people with this cannabis stuff. Most people are taking cannabis because they have anxiety, they can't sleep, they have insomnia. They'd rather take cannabis than some kind of chemical or medicine. So
can you take it?
Yeah, I've taken it. Yeah, I got me through the
Cancer.
The cancer. Yeah, I would have never survived the cancer if it hadn't been for cannabis. But afterwards, it didn't do me any good because I got to watch my diet, you know, so I can't get the munchies, right? I mean, I can't eat myself to sleep at night or I'll put on weight again, you know. And remember how big I was in LA. I mean, I can't go back to that 290.
No. Yeah. That you're absolutely right. I didn't even think about it.
I can't go back to that, you know, so I had to stop that. But now I discovered the ozone oil, right? So I take the ozone oil, which is totally renourishing my body and gives me a sense of well-being and happiness, and also reduces stress and anxiety.
How much do you take? Maybe I should try it.
Ozone oil. I just take a capsule. Ozone. Cool. Also, totally restores the body. Also reduces the anxieties, reduces the depressions, makes everything manageable in life.
You know, I was thinking earlier. I was like, I don't know. You know, Moe is he's so good with memory and going and mining cool things from your past. I was like, I don't know if there's a hinterland in his brain of stuff that doesn't get noticed, and that's cool because, you know, we get to hear really magnificent stories and funny little anecdotes, and a song will come to you, or you'll just sit and write a poem and share it with us. But have you been able to sort of use that when it comes to peer-to-peer counseling with veterans?
Yeah, we did that. We had a writers group, and that worked out very well. If I go back and do that Vet to Vet, see, the site where I started Vet to Vet 15 years ago just moved in 3 blocks from my house. So I can go there as a volunteer and just do Vet to Vet, just start all over again. So if I do that, which I probably will, that I can do. You know, it's just that, I mean, the post-cancer treatments have left me so fatigued and so disoriented and so just like dizzy and weird stuff, man. Like my feet and my legs, and they really destroyed my body. And this neurotoxicity, which is what I think I've got. You know, I mean, I got it. It's just brutal, right? So I'm only going to be able to do so much.
Right.
So I'll go over there. I'll do like an hour of vet to vet, come home. Yeah, I'll do vet to vet 4 days a week there, something like that, and call that a good experience.
And your wife, she's down in Mexico right now?
Right. Heidi's not getting out of Mexico anytime soon. I mean, just too risky, right? I mean, I don't want Heidi on the plane, you know. I mean, just too risky. And it's the airports. It seems though the airports are where the stuff spreads. The airplanes seem to be fairly uncontaminated, but it just seems like people moving through the airports is how this stuff gets spread rather easily. I mean, they can't clean out the air in the airports enough. They have that many people moving, right?
I'll tell you, when I heard, I mean, I don't know how long you were going through cancer therapy or when, you know, for the treatments and stuff, but I'll tell you, I know that everybody, even the atheists, prayed very hard that you would you know, I'd rather you be doing post-cancer treatment than to eradicate it from your body. You know, I'm just glad that you're around, you know. So I look for, you know, I think you should leave us with a song.
Leave you with a song.
Leave us with a song, and I want to talk more often. I honestly, Mo, you got to write a book or do something. I'll help.
Maybe I'll just do a video with you, and that's good enough.
Fine.
That'll be good enough. You know, I don't know where the place of books are anymore in our society.
Well, then we'll set up we'll have a Moe Armstrong, Steve Karras oral history project.
Yeah, like we could do something like that.
Yeah. What kind of guitar are you playing?
This is a little Martin traveling guitar.
Beautiful.
But you know, I get a guitar lesson now once a week from the VA, and I get a theater lesson once a week from this VA has theater as part of the session. Okay, so all right, let's go right. Wait, we're already recording, right? So I don't have to worry about that. Hey, my name is Moe Armstrong. I came from the Midwest, left 50 years ago or more. My name is Moe Armstrong. I remember those who were with me. I came to California, never quite seen any place like that, I can tell you. Hey, how you gonna keep them down on the farm after they've seen Hollywood? My name is Moe Armstrong. I've enjoyed my time, enjoyed my life. Went out and tried to see as much as I could. If anything, I tried to do too much. Now I'm learning to drop back. Frame it, write it, sing it, record it, get her down. My name is Moe Armstrong. This is a little musical thing for you.
That was great. We'll have to have another live set. Mo, have the best weekend. Happy holidays. This is just the beginning. Give my love to Haiti.
Thanks. I will. Thanks, Steve. Great
Take care of yourself.
Yeah, take care, buddy.
Bye-bye.